My son didn't ask to borrow my beach house. He evicted me from it. I was sitting on my balcony watching the sunset over the Gulf of Mexico, a glass of cheap whiskey in my hand, when my phone rang. It was Brandon. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how my arthritis was doing. He just said, "Dad, you need to clear out. I am bringing Brittany and her parents down for a month, and they need their privacy. They don't feel comfortable with you hovering around." I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I simply took a sip of my drink, looked at the safe hidden behind the painting in my study and said, "All right, son. Just let me know when." I hung up the phone and smiled, because Brandon didn't know that the house wasn't just a house. It was a trap, and he had just walked his entire entitled family right into the mouth of the wolf. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to teach an ungrateful child a lesson they would never forget. The silence on my balcony was heavy, filled only by the rhythmic crashing of the waves against the white sands of Destin. I looked at the phone screen, now dark. My thumb hovered over the contact list. I wasn't angry. Anger is a young man's game. I am 68 years old. I spent 40 years in Chicago construction, building skyscrapers and breaking strikes. I learned a long time ago that you do not get mad. You get leverage. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 6 months. It rang once. O'Malley. The voice on the other end was like gravel in a cement mixer. Sharp. Dangerous. "It is Clint," I said. My voice was steady. "It is happening," Brandon called. "He wants the house." There was a pause on the other end, followed by the sound of a lighter clicking and a long exhale. "So the prodigal son returns," O'Malley said. "Did he ask nicely?" "He told me to leave," I corrected him. "He said his in-laws Gavin and Patricia need privacy. They don't want strangers in the house." "Strangers?" O'Malley chuckled a dry, humorless sound. "You built that house with your own hands, Clint. You paid for every beam, every tile, every inch of copper wiring. And now you are the stranger." "Prepare the paperwork," I said, cutting him off. "Execute Protocol 14. I want the commercial short-term lease agreement ready, the one with the catastrophic liability clauses." "You are going through with it, then?" O'Malley asked. No mercy. I looked at the empty chair beside me where my wife Catherine used to sit. I remembered how Brandon had missed her funeral because he was on a yacht trip with Brittany's family. I remembered the credit card bills I had quietly paid off for him last year. I remembered the silence on Father's Day. "No mercy," I said. "Make sure the fine print is microscopic." I hung up. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and red. I finished my whiskey. It burned, going down a good clean burn. I had 48 hours to prepare the stage. The next 2 days were a blur of calculated activity. I didn't pack much, just a small duffel bag with a few changes of clothes, my tablet, and my medication. I left the rest. I wanted the house to look lived in. I wanted it to look vulnerable. I unlocked the liquor cabinet, the one stocked with bottles worth more than Brandon's car. I laid out the Egyptian cotton towels. I made sure the pool was sparkling blue. I was setting the cheese in the mousetrap. They arrived 2 days early. Of course they did. I was in the kitchen wiping down the granite countertops when I heard the front door code being punched in. I hadn't changed the code. I wanted them to feel ownership. I wanted them to feel powerful. The door swung open and chaos poured in. It wasn't a family arrival. It was an invasion. Brandon walked in first, wearing sunglasses that cost more than my first truck. He didn't look at me. He looked at his phone. "The signal is trash here," he muttered, stepping past me as if I were a piece of furniture. Behind him came Brittany. She was holding her phone up, filming herself. "Hey guys, we finally made it to the family estate," she chirped at the screen, her voice high and fake. "It needs a total refresh, but look at that view. Just ignore the old decor. We are going to fix all of that. She panned the camera around the room, catching me in the frame for a split second before grimacing and turning away. I was the old decor. Then came the heavy artillery. Gavin and Patricia. Gavin was a small man who took up too much space. He wore a linen suit that was already wrinkling in the Florida humidity. He walked in, dropped 2 heavy suitcases on my hardwood floor with a loud thud, and looked around with a sneer curled on his lip. "This is it?" he asked, his voice echoing in the high ceilings. "I thought you said it was a Villa Brandon. This is just a house. The floors look like laminate." "It is hand-scraped teak imported from Indonesia," I said quietly. Gavin looked at me, startled, as if the refrigerator had just spoken. "Oh, Clint, you are still here." Patricia breezed past him. She was a woman who had clearly spent a fortune trying to look 30 years younger and failed. She threw her designer handbag onto my white Italian leather sofa. The buckle scratched the leather. I heard it. I registered it. I added it to the mental tab. "It smells musty," Patricia announced, wrinkling her nose. "Brandon, tell the help to open the windows and get my bags to the master suite. I need a nap before dinner." Brandon looked at me, a flash of embarrassment crossing his face, but he quickly buried it under a layer of bravado. "Dad," he said, his voice tight. "I thought you would be gone by now." "I am just finishing up," I said. I picked up a thick manila folder from the kitchen island. Brittany stopped filming. "Why is he still here?" she whispered loudly to Brandon. "You promised we would have the place to ourselves." "My dad is allergic to dust and old people smell." I ignored her. I walked over to Brandon and held out the folder. "Before I go," I said, my voice flat, "I need you to sign this. It is just a formality for the insurance. Since you are going to be here for a month without me, the policy requires a signature from the primary occupant. Just standard liability stuff." Brandon sighed, rolling his eyes. He snatched the folder from my hand. "Seriously, Dad, now. We just drove 6 hours. It is required," I said, "unless you want to stay at a hotel." Gavin laughed from the living room where he was already opening my humidor. "A hotel? Don't be ridiculous. Just sign the damn paper, Brandon, so he can leave. I need a drink." Brandon flipped the folder open. He didn't read a word. He didn't look at the clauses. He didn't see the section titled Short-Term Commercial Lease. He didn't see the paragraph about penalty rates for damages. He didn't see the clause regarding unauthorized alterations to property. He just wanted me gone. He pulled a gold pen from his pocket, scribbled his signature on the bottom line, and shoved the folder back at me. "There," he said. "Happy now, please. We need to settle in." I took the folder. I checked the signature. It was valid. The trap was sprung. The steel jaws had just slammed shut, and he didn't even feel the pinch yet. "I will get out of your hair," I said. I picked up my duffel bag. I walked to the door. "Hey, old-timer," Gavin shouted from the kitchen. He was holding up a bottle of my 18-year-old scotch. "Where do you keep the good stuff? This looks like swill. That bottle cost $400. "Cabinet by the fridge," I said. "Key is in the door. Help yourself." Patricia was already rearranging the throw pillows, tossing my wife's hand-embroidered cushions onto the floor. "This place is so dated," she complained. "We really need to bring in a decorator, Brandon." "We will," Mom Brittany cooed. "We will make it perfect." I opened the front door. The heat of the Florida afternoon hit me, but I felt cold inside. Cold and focused. "Enjoy your stay," I said. Brandon didn't answer. He was already pouring a drink for Gavin. I closed the door behind me. The click of the lock was the most satisfying sound I had heard in years. I walked to my truck. It was a 10-year-old Ford, dented and scratched. I kept it because it ran well and because it made people underestimate me. They saw an old man in a beat-up truck, and they saw a failure. They didn't see the man who owned the construction firm that built half the skyline in Chicago. I climbed in, started the engine, and drove away. But I didn't go far. 5 miles down the coast, there is a resort called the Sanctuary. It is where senators and tech billionaires go when they want to disappear. I pulled up to the valet. The attendant recognized me immediately. "Mr. Harper," he said, opening the door. "Welcome back. Your usual suite is ready." "Thank you, David," I said. I handed him a $100 bill. "Keep the truck somewhere safe. I won't be needing it for a while." I took the elevator to the penthouse floor. The suite was cool and silent. It smelled of lemongrass and money. I set my duffel bag on the bed and walked over to the desk. I opened my laptop. I logged into the secure server. A grid of 12 camera feeds popped up on the screen. I had cameras everywhere. The living room, the kitchen, the pool deck, the hallways. The only places I didn't record were the bedrooms and bathrooms because I am not a pervert and I obey the law. But the common areas, they were my stage. I put on my noise-canceling headphones and leaned back. On the screen, I saw Gavin pouring the scotch into a red plastic cup. I saw Patricia wiping her muddy shoes on my Persian rug. I saw Brittany standing on my coffee table trying to get the perfect lighting for a selfie. And I saw Brandon, my son, sitting in my leather armchair, looking like he owned the world. "Enjoy it, boy," I whispered, because the meter just started running. The first 24 hours were a display of gluttony that turned my stomach. They drank. They ate. They made a mess. They treated my home like a fraternity house funded by a trust fund. They opened the wine cellar. Gavin found the vintage Bordeaux collection. I watched him pop the cork on a 1982 Chateau Margaux. He didn't let it breathe. He didn't pour it into a decanter. He chugged it straight from the bottle and then burped loudly. "Tastes like vinegar," he complained to Patricia. "Brandon's dad has terrible taste." Patricia was busy in the kitchen. She had decided that my granite countertops were the perfect place to chop limes for margaritas, without a cutting board. I watched the knife blade scrape against the sealed stone. I winced, not out of pain, but out of calculation. I opened a spreadsheet on my laptop and logged the entry. Item: granite countertop damage. Refinishing cost $1,200. Penalty surcharge per contract 300%. Total $3,600. Brittany was the worst. She had invited friends over without asking. A group of loud, vacuous people who tracked sand through the house and smoked vaping pens in the living room. I monitored the smoke detectors. They were smart detectors linked to my central system. They registered the particulates. Violation of non-smoking clause. Fine $500 per occurrence. I logged 10 occurrences in the first hour. But the real fun began on day 2. It was a scorcher. 95 degrees with 90% humidity. The kind of heat that makes the air feel like soup. I watched Brittany on the living room feed. She was fanning herself with a magazine. "It is freezing in here," she complained. "Why is it so cold?" She walked over to the thermostat. I watched her fingers jab at the buttons. She turned the AC down to 60 degrees. Then she walked over to the sliding glass doors that led to the balcony. She threw them wide open. "I want to hear the ocean," she said. I sat up straight in my hotel room chair. This was it. The trigger. My house was a smart home. A very smart home. I had programmed the HVAC system with specific failsafes. If the system detected that the doors were open while the AC was running at full blast for more than 15 minutes, it triggered an energy waste protocol. I watched the clock on my laptop. 10 minutes. 12 minutes. Brittany was lying on the couch, scrolling on her phone, the cold air blasting out into the hot Florida afternoon. 15 minutes. On the screen, the lights in the house flickered once. Then they went out. The hum of the heavy-duty air conditioner died instantly. The ceiling fans slowed to a halt. "Hey," Gavin shouted from the kitchen. "The TV went off. I was watching the game." "What happened?" Patricia shrieked. "It is dark." Brandon stumbled into the living room. "The power must have gone out." "Maybe a storm," I looked out my hotel window. The sky was perfectly blue. "It is not a storm," I said to the empty room. "It is a breach of contract." In the house, the temperature began to rise immediately. The Florida heat rushed in through the open doors like a physical weight. Brandon was frantically checking the breaker box in the hallway. I watched him flip switches. Nothing happened. "Call your dad," Brittany whined. "I am sweating already. This is gross." Brandon pulled out his phone. I watched it light up on my desk. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Then the automated text message I had scheduled was sent to his phone. I picked up my tablet to monitor his reaction. I saw him look at the message. I saw his face go pale. "What does he say?" Gavin demanded. "He says," Brandon stammered. "He says he is out on a fishing charter. Out of range for 3 days. "Useless old man," Gavin spat. "Call a professional. Get an electrician out here. I am not sitting in the dark." Brandon Googled a number. He called the first electrician he found. What he didn't know was that I had intercepted the search results on the house Wi-Fi. The number he called didn't go to a random local electrician. It went to a service routing center I had set up years ago for my construction business. It routed directly to a man named Mike. Mike was my former foreman. He was big, he was scary, and he was loyal to me. I picked up my burner phone and texted Mike. "You are up. Target is desperate. Cash only. Premium rates." 30 minutes later, Mike's van pulled into the driveway. I watched on the external cameras. Mike walked to the door carrying a toolbox that looked heavy enough to crush a skull. Brandon opened the door, sweating profusely. "Thank God, the whole system is dead." Mike didn't smile. He walked in, checked the breaker box, checked the thermostat, and looked at the open sliding doors. He turned to Brandon. "You ran the AC at 60 with the doors open," he asked, his voice dripping with professional judgment. "Yeah, so," Brittany said. "We wanted the breeze." "You froze the coils." Mike lied smoothly. "Complete system lockout. The safety override killed the main board to prevent a fire." "Can you fix it?" Gavin barked. Mike scratched his chin. "It is a Sunday. Emergency call-out. Plus parts. And the board is a custom unit for this high-end system." "How much?" Brandon asked. $3,000, Mike said. "Cash. Up front." $3,000, Brandon choked. "That is insane." "Take it or leave it," Mike said, starting to close his toolbox. "It is 95 degrees out. It will be 110 in here by sunset." Brandon looked at Brittany. She was already glistening with sweat, her makeup running. "Just pay him, Brandon," she screamed. "I can't be in this heat." Brandon fumbled for his wallet. "I put it on my card," he said. "Cash," Mike repeated. "I don't take cards on weekends. Too many chargebacks from tourists." Brandon didn't have $3,000 in cash. Neither did Brittany. They turned to Gavin. The big man who bragged about his investments and his wealth turned red. I didn't bring that much cash," he muttered. "I keep my assets liquid in the market." Patricia let out a huff of annoyance. "For heaven's sake. Brandon, go to the ATM." I watched Brandon run out to his car. He drove away. I knew what was about to happen. I had spoken to my banker the day I left. I had removed Brandon's access to the secondary account he thought was a joint trust. I had cut the umbilical cord. 20 minutes later, Brandon returned. He looked like he was going to vomit. "The card, it didn't work," he whispered to Brittany. "Limit exceeded. Or frozen. I don't know." Mike was waiting by the door, checking his watch. "Time is money, folks!" Gavin exploded. "This is ridiculous. What kind of man doesn't have access to his own money?" He ended up digging into a secret stash he kept in his shaving kit. A roll of hundreds that he clearly hid from Patricia. He counted out the money, his hands shaking with rage. "Here," he snarled, shoving the bills at Mike. "Fix it." Mike took the money. He counted it slowly. Then he went to the panel, flipped a single hidden switch that reset the system override I had programmed, and the lights hummed back on. "Labor done," Mike said. "Don't open the doors again." He walked out with $3,000 of Gavin's secret stash. I sat back in my hotel suite and laughed. It was the first strike, the first crack in the facade. But the night was young, and they still had access to the wine cellar. I opened the spreadsheet again. Income $3,000, repair fee. Status paid. I looked at the camera feed. Gavin was yelling at Brandon. Brittany was crying in the bathroom. Patricia was angrily cleaning the counter with a towel that was meant for the floor. I poured myself another glass of wine. The invasion had turned into an occupation. But the occupation was about to turn into a siege, and I was the one controlling the supplies. The next morning, the real destruction began. Patricia decided that my master bathroom wasn't spa-like enough. She filled the jacuzzi tub to the rim, poured in half a bottle of bubble bath, and lit candles everywhere. I watched the sensor data. The humidity in that room spiked. She fell asleep in the tub. The water overflowed. It wasn't a massive flood, but it was enough. Water seeped into the floorboards. It dripped down into the living room ceiling below. I saw the stain forming on the living room camera. A dark, spreading patch on the pristine white drywall. Damage assessment. Water damage to ceiling and subfloor. Estimated repair. $5,000. I sent the automated notification to Brandon's phone. It was a feature of the lease agreement. Real-time damage alerts. Brandon was eating breakfast toast made with my bread when his phone pinged. He looked at it. He frowned. Property alert: moisture detected in living room ceiling. Liability assessed $5,000. Amount charged to security deposit. Note: deposit depleted. Balance due immediately. What the hell? Brandon muttered. He looked up. He saw the wet spot on the ceiling. He ran upstairs. I heard the screaming through the microphone in the hallway. "Mom, you flooded the bathroom!" "It was an accident," Patricia yelled back. "Don't shout at me, it is this cheap plumbing. The overflow didn't work." The overflow worked fine. She had blocked it with a washcloth to get the water level higher. By day 3, the house was a war zone. Brittany had invited her friends back. They were in the pool. One of them, a drunk guy named Chad, decided it would be funny to throw a pool chair into the deep end. The heavy metal chair hit the underwater light. Crack. The pool light went dark. Shards of glass drifted into the water. Property alert: structural damage to pool shell. Safety hazard. Pool closed. Estimated fine $2,500. Brandon's phone pinged again. He was pacing the kitchen, his hair messy, dark circles under his eyes. "Make it stop," he whispered to the phone. "Just make it stop." But I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. They were tearing my life apart piece by piece and blaming me for it. Gavin was the worst. On day 4, he ran out of my liquor. He started looking for things to sell. I saw him on the study camera. He was looking at my collection of antique watches. I had a display case. He tried the lock. It was secure. He picked up a heavy brass paperweight. He looked around. He thought he was alone. He smashed the glass. My heart rate monitor on my watch beeped. I felt a surge of pure adrenaline. He reached in and grabbed a 1960 Rolex Submariner. It was the watch I bought when I made my first million. He shoved it into his pocket. I didn't send an alert this time. I didn't send a text. I saved the video clip. I backed it up to 3 different servers. This wasn't civil liability anymore. This was a felony. Grand larceny. I picked up my phone and called O'Malley. "We have him," I said. "Gavin just stole the submariner." "Do you want me to call the cops?" O'Malley asked. "Not yet," I said. "Let him try to fence it. Let him dig the hole so deep he can't see the sky." Day 7. 1 week in. The house was wreck. The carpet was stained. The ceiling was leaking. The pool was full of glass. The liquor cabinet was empty. And Brandon was broke. He called me. "Dad, please pick up. We need to talk. This house, it is falling apart. Everything is breaking." I let it go to voicemail. Then I sent the invoice. I compiled it all into a PDF. Rent peak season rate $14,000, $2,000 per night times 7. Service fees $5,000. Damages. Itemized $22,500. Stolen goods, market value $15,000. Total due $56,500. I emailed it to Brandon with the subject line "Interim Invoice. Overdue." I watched him open it on his phone in the living room. He dropped the phone. He literally dropped it. $56,000, he whispered. Brittany snatched the phone. "What? Who charges their own son rent? He is insane," Gavin shouted. "He is trying to scam us. We are leaving," Patricia declared. "I hate this place. It is cursed. We can't leave," Brandon yelled, his voice cracking. "The contract. Read the email." He picked up the phone and read the bold text at the bottom. "Failure to settle interim balance within 24 hours will result in immediate eviction and civil litigation. Property liens will be placed on all guarantor assets." Brandon didn't have assets, but he had put Gavin and Patricia down as guarantors on the insurance form, the lease agreement, because he thought it made him look impressive. Gavin snatched the phone. He read the clause. "You put my name on this," he roared. "You told me to sign it," Brandon screamed back. "You said it was just insurance. I watched them turn on each other. It was like watching rats in a bucket." Gavin shoved Brandon. Brandon shoved back. Brittany screamed. Patricia threw a vase. It was time to end it. I texted Mike, "Go." And I texted my friend Sheriff Miller, "It is time, Jim." 30 minutes later, the flashing blue lights illuminated the driveway. I watched from my laptop as Sheriff Miller walked up to the door. He wasn't alone. He had 2 deputies with him. Brandon opened the door. He looked relieved. "Officer, thank God. My dad, he is trying to extort us." Sheriff Miller didn't smile. He held up a piece of paper. "Brandon Harper, yes. I have a warrant for the arrest of Gavin Miller for grand larceny, and a trespass notice for all occupants of this property." Gavin tried to run out the back door. He ran right into Mike, who was standing there with his arms crossed. "Going somewhere?" Mike asked. They cuffed Gavin on the patio. They found the Rolex in his shaving kit. They dragged him out past the neighbors. Patricia was wailing. Brittany was live streaming it, crying for sympathy, until the deputy told her to put the phone away or she would be next. Brandon stood in the driveway watching his father-in-law get shoved into a squad car. He looked at the sheriff. Where is my dad?" Sheriff Miller looked at him with pure disgust. "Mr. Harper is at a secure location. He asked me to give you this." He handed Brandon a single envelope. Brandon opened it. Inside was a check for $10,000 and a note. "For your divorce lawyer. You are going to need it." I closed my laptop. I took a sip of water. The house was destroyed. It would cost me 50 grand to fix it. But watching the toxic sludge get flushed out of my life, priceless. I stayed at the resort for another week. I got a massage, I ate lobster. I slept like a baby. When I finally went back to the house, it was quiet. I walked through the ruins, the stained carpet, the broken glass. I hired a crew. We gutted it. New floors, new paint, new furniture. I erased every trace of them. 6 months later, I got a letter from Brandon. He was living in a studio apartment. Brittany had left him when the money ran out. Gavin was doing 2 years for theft. "Dad," the letter said, "I am sorry. I didn't know." I tore the letter up and threw it in the trash. He knew. He just didn't care until it cost him. I sat on my balcony watching the sunset. My whiskey tasted better than ever. Sometimes you have to burn the house down to get rid of the termites. And sometimes the best view is the one you enjoy alone. I sat in the ergonomic chair of my hotel suite, the glow of the laptop screen painting my face in cool blue light. On the screen, a grid of 12 high-definition feeds showed me the interior of the house I had built with my own hands. It was strange watching strangers inhabit your life. It felt like watching a nature documentary about invasive species. I poured myself a glass of tap water, refusing to touch the expensive minibar, and settled in for the show. The timestamp on the feed read 7 p.m. The sun had gone down, but the party at my house was just getting started. Gavin was the first to make a move that would cost him. I watched him waddle toward the wine cellar. I hadn't locked it. Locking it would have been rude, and it would have prevented them from hanging themselves. I saw him fumble with the latch, his face flushed with the cheap scotch he had already consumed. He swung the heavy cedar door open and stepped inside. The camera in the cellar was positioned high in the corner, giving me a perfect view of his bald spot as he scanned the racks. He bypassed the mid-range bottles, the ones I kept for casual dinners. He went straight for the bottom shelf, the dustiest, darkest corner of the collection. His hand closed around the neck of a 1995 Screaming Eagle Cabernet. I didn't flinch. I just opened the spreadsheet on the second monitor. Current market value $5,400. Gavin pulled it out, squinting at the label. He didn't know what it was. He just knew it looked old, and to a man like him, old meant expensive. He tucked it under his arm like a loaf of bread and marched back to the kitchen. I switched the audio feed to the kitchen island. Patricia was there, critiquing the layout of my appliances. Finally, Gavin announced, slamming the bottle down on the counter. The sound made me wince, but the glass held. Let us see what the old miser was hiding. He didn't look for a corkscrew. He grabbed a serrated steak knife and began to hack away at the foil. It was a butchery. He shredded the capsule, then jammed the corkscrew in at an angle. I watched, fascinated by his incompetence. He pulled. The cork snapped. Half of it remained in the bottle. "Who cares?" he muttered. He pushed the remaining cork down into the wine with his thumb. A $5,000 bottle of wine contaminated with cork crumbs and the sweat from his thumb. He poured it into red plastic solo cups they had brought with them. "To the beach house," Brandon shouted, raising his plastic cup, "and to getting the place to ourselves." "To us," Brittany chimed in, "and to upgrading this place." They clinked the plastic cups. They chugged the wine. Chugged it. Wine that needed to breathe for 2 hours, wine that had complex notes of dark chocolate and black currant, and they knocked it back like it was Gatorade. "It is a little bitter," Brittany said, wrinkling her nose. "Do we have any Sprite I could make a spritzer?" I typed into the spreadsheet. Item 1995 Screaming Eagle. Cost $5,400. Status desecrated. The evening wore on. The alcohol flowed. The inhibitions dropped. And then came the heat. It was a humid Florida night, the kind where the air feels heavy and sticky, clinging to your skin the moment you step outside. But inside, my industrial-grade HVAC system was keeping the house at a crisp 72 degrees. Apparently, that wasn't good enough for Brittany. I watched her on the living room feed. She was pacing, fanning herself with a decorative coaster. She was wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than my first car, but she looked miserable. "I am sweating, Brandon," she whined. Why is it so stuffy in here? It says 72, Brandon said, glancing at the thermostat on the wall. That is normal. It feels like a swamp, she snapped. I can't sleep if I am sweating. Fix it. Brandon, the dutiful servant, walked over to the thermostat. It was a smart panel touchscreen linked directly to the main server I was currently accessing. He tapped the screen. He lowered it to 70. Still hot, Brittany said from the couch. He lowered it to 68. 65. Finally, he jammed his finger down until it hit the minimum setting. 60 degrees. There, he said. That should freeze us out. But Brittany wasn't done. She walked over to the massive sliding glass doors that opened onto the pool deck. The ocean roared in the distance, a rhythmic, soothing sound. I want to hear the waves, she said. It is romantic. She unlatched the lock and slid the heavy glass door all the way open. The wall of humidity hit the living room instantly. You could almost see the condensation forming on the camera lens. The cool, conditioned air rushed out, and the thick, salty Florida night rushed in. Brandon hesitated. Babe, won't that let the cold air out? Don't be such a dad, Brandon, she laughed, twirling in the center of the room. We have the AC on max. It will balance out. It feels amazing. I sat back in my hotel room. It was 11:30 at night. They had just engaged the trap. My system was custom built. I had programmed a specific logic loop for the HVAC. If the sensors detected that the external doors were open, while the compressor was running at maximum capacity for more than 15 minutes, it triggered a system preservation protocol. It was designed to prevent the coils from freezing over and destroying the unit, but tonight it was designed to teach a lesson. I watched the timer on my screen. 12 minutes. The AC was screaming, trying to cool down the entire Gulf of Mexico. The humidity sensors in the hallway were spiking into the red zone. 14 minutes. They were laughing, pouring more of my wine, completely oblivious to the countdown hanging over their heads. 15 minutes. The automated voice of the house system cut through their laughter. It wasn't a loud voice. It was calm, polite, and terrifyingly final. Energy usage violation detected, the voice announced from the hidden speakers in the ceiling. Environmental breach in Zone 1. System override engaged. What was that? Patricia shrieked, dropping her cup. Who is talking? Gavin looked around wildly, grabbing a golf club he had found in the corner. Critical shutdown sequence initiated, the voice continued. Power to non-essential circuits will be severed in 10 seconds. Please close all external apertures to restore functionality. They didn't move. They froze. They looked at each other, confused and drunk. 10 seconds. Brandon looked at the ceiling. Is that the alarm? 5 seconds. Brittany was still standing by the open door, the humid wind blowing her hair. 3, 2, 1. The house died. It didn't just dim. It plunged into absolute abyssal darkness. The recessed lighting, the pool lights, the refrigerator hum, the aggressive roar of the air conditioner, everything cut out simultaneously. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of the ocean and Gavin's heavy breathing. What the hell? Brandon shouted. I can't see anything, my phone, Brittany screamed. Where is my phone? I watched them on the infrared feed. They were stumbling around like blind mice. Brandon pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating dust motes and panicked faces. The power is out, Brandon said. Maybe a fuse blew. It is the damn house, Gavin yelled. Did you hear that voice? It said, violation. What did you do? I didn't do anything, Brandon yelled back. I just turned down the AC. The silence from the AC unit was the most noticeable thing. Without that mechanical hum, the heat began to reclaim the house with vengeance. The cool air that had been built up was sucked out the open door within minutes, replaced by the stifling wet blanket of the Florida summer. Close the door, Patricia commanded. You are letting the bugs in. Brittany slammed the sliding door shut, but the damage was done. The air inside was already stagnant. Brandon ran to the breaker panel in the utility room. I switched camera views to follow him. He yanked the metal door open and shone his light on the switches. They were all in the on position. Nothing had tripped. This wasn't a hardware failure. This was a software lockout. It is not the breakers, he whispered, sweat already beading on his forehead. It is the system. It locked us out. He walked back to the living room. His family was gathered around the coffee table, illuminated by the ghostly glow of their smartphones. Well, Gavin demanded. Fix it. I can't, Brandon said. The system shut down. It thinks we broke a rule. Call your father, Patricia snapped. He must have a code or something. I watched Brandon dial my number. My phone sitting on the hotel desk next to me lit up silently. I let it ring. I took a sip of water. I waited until it went to voicemail. He is not answering, Brandon said, his voice rising in panic. It went straight to voicemail. Try again, Brittany shrieked. It is getting hot in here. He tried again, and again. On the fourth try, my automated text reply was sent. Currently offshore fishing. No signal. For emergency property maintenance, please refer to the manual in the study. There is no manual in the study. I burned it before I left. Useless, Gavin roared. He kicked the sofa. Absolutely useless. By 2 a.m., the house was an oven. The insulation that kept the cool air in was now trapping the heat. The temperature inside had climbed to 85 degrees and was rising. The humidity was suffocating. I watched them try to sleep. It was pathetic. They had dragged mattresses into the living room hoping for a cross breeze that didn't exist. They were stripped down to their underwear, sweating, tossing, and turning. Brittany was crying softly. My hair is going to frizz, she sobbed. I can't breathe. It feels like a sauna. Patricia was fanning herself with a magazine, the rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack sound echoing in the silent house. This is inhumane, she muttered. I am going to sue him. I am going to sue him for elder abuse. You are 60, Mom, not 90. Brandon groaned from the floor. Just go to sleep. I can't sleep, Gavin yelled. It is too hot, and I am thirsty. The water dispenser doesn't work without power. Drink tap water, Brandon said. I am not drinking tap water, Gavin spat. That is for peasants. I zoomed in on Brandon's face. He was lying on his back, staring up at the dark ceiling fan that mocked him with its stillness. He looked exhausted. He looked defeated. And for the first time, he looked scared. He realized that without me, without my help, without my house functioning perfectly to serve him, he was helpless. I typed another entry into the spreadsheet. Incident energy system override. Cause tenant negligence, open doors, plus max AC. System reset, fee $2,500. After hours service call, surcharge, $500. Status pending. I closed the laptop lid. The show was over for the night. They would survive the heat. It wouldn't kill them. But it would break them. It would strip away the veneer of civilization and leave them raw and angry. And when the sun came up and they realized the power wasn't coming back on, the real games would begin. I climbed into the hotel bed, the sheets cool and crisp against my skin, and fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. The sun rose over Destin, like a hammer striking an anvil. By 8 in the morning, the humidity inside the house had reached 90%. I sat in my air-conditioned hotel suite sipping a freshly brewed espresso, watching the aftermath of the blackout on my monitors. It was a scene of absolute misery. The beautiful people were melting. Patricia was sprawled on the leather sofa, a wet washcloth over her eyes, looking less like a socialite and more like a survivor of a shipwreck. Brittany was sitting on the floor by the sliding glass door, pressing her face against the glass, trying to find a signal on her phone, her expensive silk pajamas clinging to her sweat-drenched skin. And Gavin, the man who claimed to have a palate for fine wines, was chugging tap water from a coffee mug, his linen shirt unbuttoned to his navel, revealing a chest that was turning a blotchy red from the heat. Brandon was the most pathetic of them all. He was pacing the kitchen, his phone pressed to his ear, leaving me yet another voicemail. "Dad, seriously, pick up," he rasped, his voice cracking with dehydration and stress. "It is an emergency. The food in the fridge is going to spoil. We can't live like this." I deleted the voicemail without listening to the end. I didn't care about the food. I cared about the lesson. "Enough," Gavin roared, slamming his mug down on the table. The sound echoed through the silent, sweltering house. "Stop calling him. The old man is useless. He is probably laughing at us from a boat somewhere. We are handling this ourselves." He grabbed his own phone. "I am calling a professional. I don't care what it costs. I am not spending another minute in this sauna." I leaned forward. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I had anticipated this. I knew that a man like Gavin, arrogant and impatient, wouldn't wait for a callback. He would Google "Destin emergency electrician" and click the first result that looked expensive enough to be competent. Weeks ago, I had set up a simple landing page. Coastal Elite Electrical Services. It looked premium. Gold lettering promises a VIP service, 24/7 response for luxury estates. I paid for the ad placement to ensure it was the top result for anyone searching from my IP address. The phone number on the website didn't go to a dispatch center. It went to a burner phone in the pocket of Mike, my old foreman. I watched Gavin tap the screen. I saw him dial. On my second monitor, I saw the notification that the call was connecting. "Yes," Gavin barked into the phone. "I have an electrical emergency. Total system failure. High-end residential. I need someone now. Not in an hour. Now." I couldn't hear Mike's side of the conversation, but I knew the script. He would be calm. He would be expensive. He would be on his way. "Name your price," Gavin said, puffing out his chest, trying to regain some semblance of control. "Just get the air on." He hung up and looked at the family with a smug satisfaction. "He is on his way. See? That is how you handle things, Brandon. You don't whine to Daddy. You take action." Brandon looked at his feet, shamed. "I tried, Gavin. I don't know the area." 30 minutes later, a white van with no markings pulled into the driveway. Mike stepped out. He wasn't wearing a uniform. He was wearing heavy work boots, stained Carhartt pants, and a tight gray t-shirt that strained against biceps the size of tree trunks. He looked like a man who fixed problems by breaking them first. He carried a voltage meter and a heavy tool bag. I texted Mike, "Showtime, squeeze them." Mike walked to the front door and pounded on it. No doorbell since the power was out. Gavin opened it, sweat dripping from his nose. "You the electrician?" Mike didn't answer. He walked past Gavin into the foyer, sniffing the air. It smelled of stale sweat and expensive perfume turning sour. "Panel," Mike grunted. Gavin pointed to the utility room. "In there. The whole thing just died." Mike walked into the utility room. Brandon and Gavin followed him like puppies. I switched the camera feed to the utility room. Mike opened the breaker box. He made a show of testing the leads with his meter. He hummed. He shook his head. He pulled off the panel cover and shined his flashlight into the guts of the system. He stood up slowly and wiped his hands on a rag. "Bad news," Mike said, his voice deep and rough. What Brandon asked, panic flaring in his eyes. "You fried the main logic controller." Mike lied effortlessly. "This is a smart system. You pushed it too hard with the thermal variance. The board melted to protect the compressor. Safety lockout." "Can you fix it?" Gavin demanded. Mike looked at him. "I can bypass the safety. Install a commercial-grade bridge. Get the AC running. but the part alone is expensive, and it is Sunday morning. Emergency rates apply. Just do it." Gavin waved his hand dismissively. "How much?" "3,000, Mike said. "Flat rate." The silence in the small room was heavy. Brandon choked. $3,000 for a fuse. "It ain't a fuse, kid," Mike said, narrowing his eyes. "It is a logic board, and you are paying for my time. I was on my way to a fishing trip. You want cool air or you want to sweat?" "We want cool air," Gavin said quickly. "Do it. Brandon, pay the man." Brandon froze. He looked at Gavin, then at Mike, then at the floor. Brandon squeaked. "It is your father's house," Gavin said, wiping his forehead. "It is your responsibility. Put it on your card. We will sort it out with Clint later." Brandon swallowed hard. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. He extracted his platinum card, the one he flashed at dinners, the one he used to buy bottle service at clubs, the one he thought was linked to a bottomless trust fund. He didn't know that the trust fund was just a standing transfer order from my personal account to his. An order I had canceled the moment I drove away from the house. He handed the card to Mike. Mike pulled a square reader from his pocket and plugged it into his phone. He swiped the card. We waited. The three of them in that hot, small room. The reader beeped, a harsh descending tone. "Declined," Mike said, looking at the screen. Brandon frowned. "That is impossible. Try it again. It must be the signal." Mike swiped it again. Same sound. Declined. "Do you have another card?" Mike asked, bored. Brandon's hands were shaking now. He pulled out a second card. A gold card. Declined. "Try the Visa." Brandon whispered, sweat pouring down his face. Declined. I sat in my hotel room watching my son crumble. It wasn't just about the money. It was the realization. He was realizing that he wasn't rich. I was rich. He was just a passenger, and I had ejected him from the vehicle. All those years of thinking he was a successful day trader, a savvy investor. It was all a lie, he told himself. His returns were just allowances I gave him to keep his dignity intact. Mike handed the cards back. "Look, buddy, I don't have time for this. Cash or I walk. I don't have 3,000 in cash," Brandon yelled, his voice cracking. Gavin stared at Brandon. The look on his face wasn't pity. It was disgust. Pure, unadulterated contempt. "You are broke," Gavin said. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. It is a banking error," Brandon stammered. "My assets are tied up in crypto." "Crypto." Gavin scoffed. He turned to Mike. "Wait here." Gavin stormed out of the room. I watched him on the hallway camera. He went into the guest bedroom and dug through his suitcase. He pulled out a leather toiletry bag. Inside, hidden beneath a false bottom, was a thick roll of $100 bills. This was interesting. Gavin and Patricia had filed for bankruptcy 5 years ago. They claimed to be destitute. They lived with Brandon rent-free because they were temporarily illiquid. Yet here was Gavin peeling off crisp Benjamins from a stack that looked to be at least 10 grand. He marched back to the utility room. He didn't look at Brandon. He looked at Mike. Here he snarled, counting out the bills. 1, 2, 3, 30, 3,000. Fix it. Mike took the money. He held each bill up to the flashlight, checking the watermark. It was a slow, deliberate insult. "Looks real." Mike grunted. He shoved the cash into his pocket. Then he turned back to the panel. He didn't install a part. He didn't replace a board. He reached deep into the box and flipped a single small toggle switch that I had installed for exactly this purpose. It was a manual override for the lockout. The system hummed. A second later, the heavy clunk of the compressor kicking in echoed from outside. Cool air began to hiss from the vents. "Done," Mike said. He closed the panel. "That was it?" Brandon asked, his voice small. You just flipped a switch. I knew which switch to flip, Mike said. That is what you paid for. Knowledge. He walked out of the utility room, brushing past Gavin. Receipt? Gavin asked. Mike laughed. A deep belly laugh. Emergency calls are off the books, pal. No receipt. He walked out the front door, got in his van, and drove away. I opened my spreadsheet. Income $3,000 cash. Source Gavin's secret stash. Allocation beer money for Mike. Inside the house, the cool air was returning, but the atmosphere was colder than liquid nitrogen. Brandon stood in the kitchen holding his useless credit cards. Brittany walked in looking relieved that the AC was on. Finally, she sighed. Good job, babe. She went to hug him, but Gavin stepped between them. He didn't pay for it, Gavin said, his voice icy. I did. Brittany looked confused. What? Why Brandon has money? Apparently not, Gavin said. His cards were declined. All of them. Brittany looked at Brandon. Her eyes narrowed. What do you mean declined? I think Dad froze the accounts, Brandon whispered. He must have access to the joint trust. He cut me off. Joint trust, Gavin laughed, a harsh barking sound. You told me it was your money, Brandon. You told me you were a partner in his firm. You told me you were self-made. I am, Brandon protested. He handles the back end. You are an allowance boy, Gavin spat. You are 32 years old, and you are living on an allowance. And now Daddy has taken away the keys to the kingdom. Patricia walked in, drying her face with a towel. Why is everyone shouting? The air is back on. Let's have a drink. We can't, Gavin said. We drank it all. And we can't buy more because your son-in-law is broke. Brittany looked at Brandon like he was a stranger. Like he was a bug she had found in her salad. Is that true? She asked. Do we have no money, babe? It is temporary, Brandon pleaded. I just need to call the bank on Monday. You need to call your father, she hissed. You need to fix this. I am not spending my vacation with a broke husband. She turned on her heel and walked out to the pool deck. Gavin looked at Brandon one last time. You owe me $3,000, he said, and I charge interest. He followed his daughter outside. Brandon was left alone in the kitchen. He looked at the granite countertop, at the empty wine bottles, at the silent phone in his hand. He looked small. He looked defeated. I zoomed in on his face. I wanted to see it. I wanted to see the moment the reality set in. He wasn't the king of the castle. He wasn't the successful heir. He was a trespasser in a house he couldn't afford, with a family that only loved him when the card went through. He slid down the cabinets and sat on the floor, putting his head in his hands. I took a sip of my espresso. It was cold, but it tasted sweet. Phase 1 was complete. They were cool now, physically, but financially they were sweating, and I hadn't even sent the invoice for the wine yet. I opened my email client. It was time to draft the next document. The daily damage report. I started typing. To Brandon Harper, subject, unauthorized repairs and security alert. It has come to our attention that unauthorized third-party contractors were granted access to the property. This is a violation of Lease Clause 8.2. A security audit fee of $1,500 has been added to your account. Additionally, please be advised that the emergency repair performed was not authorized by the property owner and voids the warranty on the HVAC unit. Replacement cost of unit $12,000. This amount has been provisionally charged to your liability ledger. I hit send. I watched Brandon's pocket buzz. He didn't even check it. He just sat there. Good. Let it pile up. I turned my attention to the pool camera. Brittany and Gavin were talking in hushed tones. Brittany was crying. Gavin was gesturing angrily. Patricia was pouring vodka from a flask she had hidden in her purse. The cracks were forming. The foundation was shifting. And tomorrow, I would send the repo men. I closed the laptop. I needed a shower. I had a dinner reservation at the best steakhouse in town, and I was paying with my own card, because I earned it. The cool air from the repaired HVAC system should have lowered the temperature in the house, but the tension was rising faster than the Florida sun. I watched from my hotel suite as my uninvited guests settled into a rhythm of destructive entitlement that was frankly breathtaking. It was Monday afternoon. They had been in my home for less than 48 hours, and they had already cost Brandon $3,000 in cash. But that was just the appetizer. The main course was about to be served on my living room floor. Patricia had decided that the afternoon called for a celebration of their survival. She had opened a bottle of Pinot Noir from my reserve rack, a 2015 vintage that retailed for $400. She wasn't drinking it from a crystal glass. She was drinking it from a coffee mug because the dishwasher was full and she refused to hand wash anything. I watched her on the living room camera. She was pacing on the antique Persian rug I had bought in Istanbul 20 years ago. It was a silk and wool blend, hand-knotted, irreplaceable. It anchored the room. Patricia was gesturing wildly with her mug, recounting some story to Gavin about how she had told off a cashier at Neiman Marcus. She spun around for emphasis. The wine sloshed. It went airborne. A dark, violent splash of red hit the cream-colored silk. I didn't gasp. I leaned in. Patricia stared at the stain. "Oops," she muttered. She didn't look horrified. She looked annoyed. Mom Brittany yelled from the couch. "That is disgusting. It looks like blood." "It is fine," Patricia said, waving her hand. "It is just wine. Brandon, get some club soda." Brandon ran to the kitchen. He came back with a can of seltzer. Patricia poured the water directly onto the rug. "Do not scrub it," I whispered to the screen. "Blot it." She didn't blot it. She grabbed a rough kitchen towel and began to scrub the stain with the force of a woman trying to erase a mistake. She ground the wine deep into the delicate silk fibers. She destroyed the weave. The stain spread, turning from a splash into a massive pinkish bruise. "It is not coming out," she huffed, throwing the towel down. "This rug is cheap anyway. Who buys cream rugs for a beach house?" "It looks terrible," Gavin said. "Get it out of here. It ruins the vibe." Brandon stood there staring at the ruin of a $20,000 textile. "Mom, that rug looked expensive. Dad always told us to take our shoes off on it." "Your father is a fuss budget," Patricia snapped. "Help me move it. We will put it on the balcony. The sun will bleach the stain out." I laughed out loud in my hotel room. The Florida sun wouldn't bleach it out. It would bake the tannins into the wool and rot the silk backing within hours. They dragged the heavy rug through the sliding doors and draped it over the railing like a wet towel. I opened my laptop's command center. It was time for a notification. I selected the pre-written template for interior damage and input the value. To Brandon Harper, subject lease violation, damage report. Asset ID Persian silk rug, 12 by 15. Condition irreparable liquid damage and improper handling. Replacement value $18,500. Cleaning fee waived due to total loss. Current liability balance $21,500. Note payment schedule accelerated due to high-risk activity. I hit send. I watched Brandon on the feed. He was standing by the empty space on the floor where the rug used to be. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. I saw his shoulders slump. I saw him read the number. $18,500. He looked at his mother-in-law, who was pouring herself another mug of wine. "Mom," he whispered, his voice trembling. "That rug, the system just charged me $18,000. Patricia laughed. "Don't be silly, Brandon. Systems don't charge people. It is just an automated email. Your father probably has it set up to scare people. Besides, he has insurance. That is what insurance is for, to replace old things with new things. It is billed to me, Brandon said, showing her the phone. It says liability balance. Gavin snatched the phone. He squinted at the screen. Ignore it. It is a glitch. Or your dad is playing games. If he wants to bill us, let him try to collect in court. I know lawyers. You are bankrupt, Gavin, I said to the screen. Your lawyers work on retainer and you haven't paid them in years. Brandon took the phone back. He looked terrified. He was starting to do the math. $3,000 for the AC, $18,000 for the rug. He was over $20,000 in debt to me, and it was only Monday. But the day wasn't over. And Brittany had plans. She had decided that the evening required a pool party, not a quiet family swim. A party? She had invited people. I didn't know who they were. Local friends, maybe people she met on Instagram. 4 cars pulled into my driveway at sunset. Strangers. I watched them pile out. 6 people. They carried cases of cheap beer and a massive Bluetooth speaker. They walked into my house without knocking. Who are these people? Brandon asked, trying to block the hallway. Relax, babe, Brittany said, pushing past him. They are followers, local influencers. We need to create content. This house is boring without people. They spilled onto the pool deck. The music started. It was bass-heavy, thumping trash that rattled the windows. They started drinking. They started vaping. I checked my occupancy sensors. Lease limit 6 occupants. Current count 12. Violation penalty $500 per unauthorized guest. Total $3,000. I didn't send that bill yet. I wanted to wait. I wanted to see what they would break. It didn't take long. The party moved into the pool. It was dark now. The underwater lights were on, casting a blue glow over the water. It looked nice. Until one of the guests, a guy with a neck tattoo and a behavior problem, decided to rearrange the furniture. He picked up one of the heavy ceramic planters I kept by the edge of the patio. It weighed about 50 pounds and contained a mature palm. Cannonball, he screamed. He didn't jump in. He threw the planter. I watched it sail through the air on the night vision camera. It was like a slow-motion disaster. The heavy ceramic pot hit the water. It didn't just splash. It sank like a stone and slammed into the side of the pool wall, directly impacting the housing of the main underwater LED light. Crunch. The sound was audible even over the music. The pool lights flickered violently and then died. The water went dark. Whoa, someone laughed. You killed the lights, bro. The planter had cracked the gunite shell. I could see the water level data on my dashboard. It was dropping. Slowly, but it was dropping. The pool was leaking. I sat up straight. This was structural. This was expensive. I pulled up the contractor estimates I kept on file for insurance purposes. Pool resurfacing, electrical repair, structural epoxy injection. Total estimated repair, $15,000. I drafted the text. To Brandon Harper, subject, critical infrastructure damage. Incident detected, impact. Trauma to pool shell. Damage, structural fracture, electrical failure, water loss. Safety hazard, critical. Pool use is now prohibited. Assessment, $15,000. Total liability balance, $39,500. Action required immediate cessation of all aquatic activities. I sent it. Brandon was in the kitchen, hiding from the party. He was nursing a beer, staring at the wall. His phone buzzed. He looked at it. He didn't drop it this time. He just stared at it. He went pale. He looked like he was having a heart attack. $39,500. He ran to the sliding door and threw it open. Get out, he screamed. Everyone, get out! The music stopped. The guests looked at him. Brittany swam to the edge of the pool. "Brandon, what is wrong with you? You are embarrassing me." "The pool is broken," Brandon yelled, pointing at the dark water. "That idiot threw a planter on the light. It cost $15,000. The guy with the neck tattoo climbed out of the pool. "Chill, man. It is just a light." "Get out of my house," Brandon roared. He grabbed a pool cue from the rack on the patio. "I swear to God, get out." The guests scrambled. They grabbed their beer and ran. They didn't want to deal with a crazy man. Brittany climbed out of the pool, shivering in the warm night air. "You ruined my content," she hissed. "You are acting psychotic." "Psychotic?" Brandon laughed, a high, hysterical sound. "I am $40,000 in debt, Brittany. In 2 days, your mother ruined the rug. Your friend ruined the pool. And I am the one getting the bills. It is not real money," Gavin said, stepping out of the shadows with a cigar in his mouth. He was smoking my Cuban cigars. "Your dad sends you a bill, you tear it up. That is how family works. He is just trying to teach you a lesson about responsibility. He won't actually make you pay." "He froze my accounts, Gavin." Brandon screamed. He cut me off. "This isn't a lesson. It is an execution." Brandon looked at his phone again. He dialed my number. I watched my phone ring on the desk. "Brandon calling." I didn't touch it. I let the ringtone fill the hotel room. It was a cheerful tune. It contrasted beautifully with the misery on my screen. On the third ring, the voicemail picked up. "You have reached Clint. I am currently out on the boat chasing a marlin. Reception is spotty. If this is an emergency regarding the property, please refer to your lease agreement. If this is personal, leave a message. I will get back to you in a month." Beep. Brandon didn't leave a message. He threw his phone. It skidded across the kitchen island and hit the floor. He slid down the cabinets again, burying his face in his hands. "Dad," he sobbed. "Please, pick up." Gavin looked at him with disdain. "Stop crying. It is pathetic. So the pool is broken. So the rug is dirty. We still have the house. We still have the beach. We are going to enjoy this vacation whether you like it or not." Patricia poured me a drink. "We are out of wine," Patricia said from the living room. "Then open the whiskey," Gavin ordered. "It is locked," Brandon mumbled from the floor. "He locked the cabinet after you took the scotch." "Break it open," Gavin said. Brandon looked up. His eyes were red. "Don't touch it." Or what Gavin challenged him. "You going to hit me with that pool cue? You don't have the guts." Gavin walked into the study. I watched him approach the liquor cabinet. It was a solid oak piece with a reinforced glass front. He rattled the handle. Locked. He looked around. He picked up a heavy brass bookend from my desk. "Don't do it," Brandon whispered from the doorway. Gavin swung the bookend. Smash! The glass shattered. Gavin reached in and pulled out a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle. "Market value. $2,000. Add it to the tab." Gavin sneered at Brandon. I opened my spreadsheet. Item, property damage cabinetry. Value $800. Item, theft. Pappy Van Winkle, 23 years. Value $2,000. Total liability balance $42,300. I didn't send a text this time. Brandon knew. He walked away. He went into the guest bedroom and closed the door. I switched the camera. He lay on the bed staring at the ceiling while his in-laws drank his inheritance in the other room. He was beginning to understand. He was beginning to fear the numbers. The numbers were real. The numbers didn't care about his feelings. And the numbers were climbing. I closed my laptop. Tomorrow I would introduce them to the concept of asset seizure. The eviction notice was already drafted. I just needed to wait for the total to hit 50,000. At this rate, it would happen before lunch. It was day 15 of the occupation. From the cool lemon-scented air of my hotel suite, I watched the degradation of my property on the monitors. The house looked like a high-end squat. The pool was a stagnant pond of algae green because the pump had been remotely disabled after the light fixture incident. The living room was a minefield of empty takeout boxes and dirty laundry. The air inside was stifling, a humid soup of resentment and body odor, because they were terrified to touch the thermostat again after the $3,000 repair bill. I sat at my desk finishing a plate of eggs Benedict. I wiped my mouth with a linen napkin and checked the time. 9 a.m. sharp. It was time for the mid-month audit. But I wasn't sending an email this time. Emails were too easy to ignore. Emails didn't have physical weight. I was sending a moving truck. I watched the driveway camera. A massive black box truck backed in. It didn't have a friendly moving company logo on the side. It said Asset Recovery Logistics in stark white letters. 2 men hopped out. They were built like linebackers wearing dark uniforms and sunglasses. They didn't knock. They walked straight to the patio. Gavin was sitting on one of my teak lounge chairs nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee wearing a silk robe that was stained with sweat. He jumped up when he saw the men. "Hey!" he shouted, tightening his robe. "Who are you? This is private property. Get out of here." The lead man, a guy O'Malley called Stone, didn't even slow down. He checked a clipboard. "Item 14, Stone said to his partner. "Teak lounger set. 4 pieces. Loaded up." The partner grabbed the end of the chair Gavin was standing next to. "Excuse me, sir," the partner grunted. "You need to move," Gavin sputtered. "I am not moving. I am a guest here. You are stealing, Brandon. Brandon, get out here. There are looters." Brandon came running out of the house looking like a ghost. He had lost 10 pounds in 2 weeks. His eyes were sunken. He was wearing the same shorts he had on 3 days ago. "What is happening?" Brandon asked, his voice trembling. "These goons are taking the furniture," Gavin roared. "Call the police." Stone stopped. He turned to Brandon. He held out a clipboard with a carbon copy document attached to it. "Are you Brandon Harper?" Stone asked. "Yes," Brandon whispered. "Mr. Harper, I am executing a collateral seizure order pursuant to Clause 8, Section C of your lease agreement," Stone said, his voice flat and bored. "Due to the outstanding balance exceeding the security deposit by 500%, the property owner has authorized the liquidation of non-essential furnishings to offset the liability." Brandon stared at him. "Liquidation. We are taking the stuff to pay the bill, kid." Stone translated. "Step aside." Stone nodded to his partner. They grabbed the heavy teak table, the one I had imported from Bali. They lifted it like it was made of balsa wood and marched it toward the truck. "You can't do that," Patricia shrieked, running out onto the patio in her nightgown. "That is where we eat." "You can eat on the floor, ma'am," Stone said without looking back. Gavin grabbed Brandon by the shoulders. "What is he talking about, Brandon?" "What lease agreement?" "You said we were borrowing the house. I signed a paper." Brandon stammered. "Dad said it was for insurance." Stone walked back from the truck. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He slapped it into Brandon's chest. "This is for you," Stone said. "The interim invoice. You have 24 hours to settle the balance or we come back for the inside furniture. And the car." Brandon held the envelope like it was a bomb. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely open the flap. He pulled out a sheaf of papers. I zoomed in with the camera. I knew exactly what it said. I had drafted it myself the night before. Invoice number 001. Tenant Brandon Harper. Guarantors Gavin and Patricia Miller. Itemized charges: base rent, peak season commercial rate, $30,000. Premium vintage alcohol consumption, $22,000. HVAC, Damage and repair, surcharge, $12,000. Pool structural repair, $15,000. Rug replacement, $18,000. Cleaning fee biohazard rate due to sanitation neglect, $3,000. Unpaid utility penalties, $5,000. Total due. Immediately, $105,000. Brandon made a sound like a dying animal. He dropped the papers. They scattered on the patio stones. 100,000, he wheezed. Gavin snatched up the summary page. He read it. His face turned a color I had never seen before. A deep, violent purple. Rent, Gavin whispered. The word came out like a hiss. $30,000 in rent. He looked at Brandon. His eyes were bulging. You told me he gave us the house, Gavin said, his voice rising to a shout. You told me you owned this place. I thought I did. Brandon cried. I thought, eventually. You signed a lease, Gavin screamed. He shoved the paper into Brandon's face. Look at this. It says commercial short-term lease. It says rent is $2,000 a night. You idiot. You absolute moron. It was a trick, Brandon yelled back, backing away. He tricked me. He said it was insurance. You didn't read it, Patricia screeched. She grabbed the paper from Gavin. You signed a legal document without reading it, and you put us down as guarantors. What? Gavin froze. He snatched the paper back. He flipped to the signature page. There, in black and white, printed clearly under the guarantor section, were their names. Brandon had filled them in. You put my name on a $100,000 debt, Gavin roared. I had to. Brandon sobbed. The form asked for secondary income sources. I thought it was just a formality. The movers were still working in the background. They were taking the expensive gas grill now. The wheels rattled over the pavers. It was the soundtrack to a family imploding. Gavin stepped forward. He closed the distance between him and Brandon. He was shorter than my son, but in that moment he looked 10 feet tall with rage. You lied to us, Gavin said, his voice shaking with fury. You brought us here to a house you didn't own to drink wine you couldn't afford, and you signed our financial death warrant. You aren't a provider, Brandon. You are a parasite. I didn't know, Brandon pleaded. I swear, Gavin, I didn't know. Don't call me Gavin. The slap echoed across the patio. It was loud. It was crisp. It was violent. Gavin struck Brandon across the face with the back of his hand. It wasn't a playful slap. It was a strike meant to hurt, meant to humiliate. Brandon stumbled back, clutching his cheek. He looked at his father-in-law with shock. Tears welled up in his eyes. You hit me, Brandon whispered. I should kill you, Gavin screamed. Do you know what this means? If we don't pay this, he will come after my assets. He will put a lien on my... He stopped. He realized what he was saying. He didn't have assets. He was bankrupt. But he had been pretending to be rich for so long that he had forgotten the truth. But Patricia hadn't. She went pale. Gavin, she whispered. The storage unit. The car. If they run a credit check, they will find out we have nothing. Gavin finished for her, screaming at the sky. He turned back to Brandon. You exposed us, you dragged us into your mess, and now everyone is going to know. Brittany was standing by the sliding door. She had been filming the movers for her Instagram story, trying to spin it as a redecorating day. But she had stopped. She was staring at her father, hitting her husband. Daddy, she said, her voice small. Why did you hit Brandon? Because your husband is a fraud, Gavin yelled at her. He is not a partner in the firm. He is a tenant, and he is broke. And now, thanks to his stupidity, we owe his father $100,000. Brittany looked at Brandon. She looked at the red mark blooming on his cheek. She didn't run to comfort him. She didn't yell at her father. She looked at the invoice on the ground. Is that true? She asked Brandon. Did you sign a lease, babe? Listen, Brandon begged, reaching for her. Don't touch me, she snapped, recoiling. You lied to me. You told me this was our house. You told me we were set for life. It will be, Brandon cried. When he dies, it is all mine. He is not dead, Gavin shouted. He is alive and he is robbing us blind, and you handed him the gun. Stone walked back onto the patio. He had loaded the last of the furniture. The patio was bare, just concrete and shame. Truck is loaded, Stone announced. He looked at the family drama with zero interest. You folks have 24 hours to wire the funds, or we come back for the electronics and the vehicle. What vehicle? Brandon asked, terrified. The Range Rover, Stone said, pointing to the driveway. It is parked on the property. The contract puts a lien on all vehicles garaged on the premises in the event of default. That is a lease too, Brandon shrieked. I don't own it, then you better pay up, Stone said, before the repo man beats us to it. He signaled his partner. They walked away. The truck engine roared to life. They drove off with $20,000 worth of my furniture. Silence descended on the patio. The sun was beating down. There was nowhere to sit. Gavin looked at Brandon. He was breathing hard, his face red, his chest heaving under the silk robe. Fix this, Gavin hissed. Go to the bank. Sell a kidney. I don't care. Get the money. I can't. Brandon wept. I don't have it. Then get out of my sight, Gavin said. He turned and walked into the house. Patricia followed him, shooting a look of pure venom at Brandon. Brittany stood there for a second longer. You are pathetic, she whispered. She went inside and slid the glass door shut. She locked it. Brandon was left alone on the empty patio. He touched his cheek where Gavin had slapped him. He looked at the invoice fluttering in the breeze. He looked at the pool full of green water. I zoomed in. I wanted to see his eyes. I wanted to see if there was any spark of rebellion, any spine left in him. There wasn't. He just sank to his knees on the hot concrete and began to sob. I took a sip of my coffee. It was cold now. But it didn't matter. The family had fractured. The money had run out. And the truth was bleeding out into the open. Gavin was a violent fraud. Patricia was an enabler. Brittany was a gold digger. And Brandon was nothing. I opened my laptop's calendar. It was day 15. I had planned for 30. But looking at the scene on the patio, at the raw violence and the despair, I realized we were ahead of schedule. They wouldn't last another week. They would kill each other before the month was out. Unless I gave them a push. I picked up my phone and called O'Malley. Did Stone get the furniture? I asked. Loaded and secured, O'Malley said. He said the father-in-law threw a punch. I saw, I said. It was beautiful. Now execute the next phase. Already, O'Malley asked. Yes, I said. Gavin is terrified of exposure. He mentioned assets he doesn't have. He is hiding something. I want you to run a deep dive on Gavin Miller. Find out who he owes. Find out why he is terrified of a credit check. I will have it by morning, O'Malley promised. Good, I said. And O'Malley. Yeah. Send the water company to the house tomorrow. Tell them to cut the main line. You're enjoying this, aren't you? O'Malley asked. I looked at the screen. Brandon was still crying on the concrete. I am not enjoying it, I said quietly. I am doing necessary demolition. You have to clear the rot before you can rebuild. I hung up. Tomorrow the water would run dry, and then we would see what really crawled out from under the rocks. The water stopped running on Tuesday morning. I watched it happen on the kitchen feed. Patricia was trying to fill a pot with water to boil pasta, which was the only food they had left that didn't require refrigeration. She turned the faucet handle. A pitiful gurgle echoed through the pipes, followed by a hiss of air, and then nothing. Not a drop. She rattled the handle back and forth as if brute force could summon hydration from the municipal supply. "Gavin," she screamed, her voice cracking with dehydration and rage. "The water is gone." Gavin was on the patio trying to find a spot of shade that didn't smell like the rotting algae in the pool. He stormed inside, his face a mask of fury. "What do you mean gone?" he demanded. "Gone," Patricia yelled, throwing the pot into the sink. The clatter was deafening in the silent house. "Nothing comes out. The toilets won't flush." I sat in my hotel room enjoying a glass of sparkling mineral water with a slice of lime. I had called the water company yesterday. I told them I was doing major plumbing renovations and needed the main line shut off at the street for safety reasons. It was a lie, but a believable one. And since I was the account holder, they applied within 24 hours. The house was already an oven. Now it was becoming a biohazard. Without water, the toilets were useless. Without water, they couldn't wash the sweat off their bodies. The smell was already starting to build a thick, cloying mixture of stale perspiration, garbage, and despair. Brandon walked into the kitchen. He looked like a man who had walked through a desert. His lips were chapped. His hair was matted. "Did you pay the water bill?" Brandon asked Gavin. "You said you would handle the utilities if I handled the rent." "I didn't pay anything," Gavin roared. "I don't have access to my accounts." "It is a banking error." "It is not an error," Brandon whispered, his eyes hollow. "You are broke. We are all broke. And now we are going to die of thirst in my father's house." "Don't be dramatic," Brittany snapped from the doorway. She was scrolling frantically on her phone using the last percentage of her battery. "We just need to buy bottled water." "With what money?" Brandon asked. Gavin ignored them. He was looking around the room with the eyes of a trapped animal. He wasn't looking for water. He was looking for an exit strategy. He needed cash. He needed a way to get a hotel room, a plane ticket, anything to get away from this nightmare he had helped create. I saw his eyes land on the heavy oak door of my private study. I leaned closer to my laptop screen. The study was the only room they hadn't breached yet. It had a deadbolt. But a deadbolt is only as strong as the doorframe, and Gavin was desperate. He waited until the afternoon. The heat was at its peak. Patricia and Brittany were lying on the bare floor of the living room, trying not to move. Brandon was outside, sitting by the empty pool, staring into the green sludge. Gavin moved. He went to the garage and came back with a crowbar. I watched him approach the study door. He looked over his shoulder. He was sweating profusely, his shirt clinging to his back. He wedged the crowbar into the door jamb. I could have called the police right then. Breaking and entering. Attempted burglary. But I didn't. I wanted to see what he would take. I wanted to see how low he would go. He leaned his weight into the crowbar. The wood splintered with a loud crack. "What was that?" Patricia called out weakly from the living room. "Nothing." Gavin shouted back, his voice strained. "Just fixing a window." He gave one final heave. The door popped open. Gavin stumbled into my sanctuary. It was the one room in the house I kept climate-controlled with a separate hidden unit mostly to protect my books and collections. The cool air hit him, and he paused, closing his eyes for a second. Then greed took over. He ignored the books. He ignored the artwork. He went straight for the display cabinet in the corner. Inside that cabinet was the one thing I valued almost as much as the house itself. My retirement gift to myself. A vintage Rolex Daytona Paul Newman dial. It was worth easily $200,000 on the collector's market. I kept it in a winding box behind reinforced glass. Gavin didn't know watches like I did, but he knew the Crown logo. He knew gold. He knew he could pawn it for enough cash to disappear. He didn't bother with the lock on the cabinet. He used the crowbar again. He smashed the glass. Shards rained down onto the carpet. He reached in his hand, shaking, and grabbed the watch. He shoved it deep into the pocket of his dirty linen shorts. He looked around, grabbed a few silver paperweights for good measure, and then hurried out of the room, pulling the broken door shut behind him as best he could. I saved the video clip. I exported it in high definition. I didn't send it to the police. Not yet. I sent it to the one person who could inflict more damage on Gavin than any judge. I sent it to Brittany. I attached a simple message from an anonymous number. Your father found a way to pay for a hotel. Ask him what is in his pocket. I watched Brittany's phone light up on the living room floor. She groaned and picked it up. She read the text. She frowned. Then she tapped the video file. I saw her face change. I saw the confusion turn to shock, and the shock turned to a horror so deep it looked like physical pain. She watched her father, her hero, the man who claimed to be a tycoon, smash a glass cabinet and shove a stolen watch into his pants like a common junkie. She stood up. Her legs were shaky, but her rage was stabilizing her. She walked into the kitchen. Gavin was there drinking a glass of warm tap water he had managed to drain from the bottom of the water heater. He looked guilty. He looked jumpy. Dad, Brittany said. Her voice was quiet. Deadly. Gavin jumped. What? What is it, princess? What is in your pocket? She asked. Gavin froze. Nothing. Just my wallet. Why, show me, she said. Don't be ridiculous. Gavin scoffed, trying to brush past her. I need to go out for a bit. I am going to find a store that takes checks. You are lying, Brittany whispered. She held up the phone. She played the video. The sound of shattering glass echoed in the silent, hot kitchen. Gavin stared at the tiny screen. His face went gray. Where did you get that? He hissed. Who sent you that? You stole it, Brittany screamed. You stole Brandon's dad's watch. Patricia sat up in the living room. What? Who stole what? He is a thief, Mom! Brittany yelled, pointing a trembling finger at her father. He broke into the office. He has the watch in his pocket right now. Gavin grabbed Brittany's wrist. Give me the phone, delete that, don't touch me, she shrieked, pulling away. Brandon ran in from the patio. He saw Gavin lunging at Brittany. Hey, Brandon shouted. Get away from her, he pushed Gavin. Gavin stumbled back, clutching his pocket, protecting his loot. You people are crazy, Gavin yelled. I am trying to save us. This watch. I can sell it. I can get us a hotel suite. I can get us tickets home. You are stealing, Brandon yelled. That is my father's watch. It was a gift from my mother. I don't care, Gavin roared. He pulled the watch out. It glinted in the sunlight streaming through the dirty windows. It is just metal. It is a ticket out of this hellhole. And I am taking it. Patricia stood up, swaying slightly. Gavin put it back. We are not thieves. Shut up, Patricia, Gavin snapped. You think your little luncheons pay for themselves? You think that car you drove was paid off? I have been juggling debt for 10 years. I am broke, we are all broke, and this watch is the only real money I have seen in a decade. The silence that followed was heavy. The truth was finally out. It hung in the humid air, uglier than the smell of the trash. Brittany stared at her father. You are broke. I have been borrowing from Peter to pay Paul since you were in college, Gavin spat. Why do you think I pushed you to marry Brandon? I thought he was rich. I thought he was the golden goose. He looked at Brandon with pure hatred. But he is just a loser with a rich daddy who cut him off. Brandon looked like he had been punched in the gut. He looked at Brittany. Did you know I didn't know it was this bad. Brittany stammered, tears streaming down her face, mixed with sweat. I knew things were tight. But you pushed me to marry him for money, Brandon whispered. Brittany didn't answer. She just looked at her father, who was clutching the stolen watch like a lifeline. I am leaving. Gavin announced. I am taking the car. I am going to find a pawn shop. You can't take the car, Brandon said. The movers took the keys. Remember, Gavin stopped. He looked around wildly. Then I will walk. I will walk to the highway and hitchhike. I am not staying here to die of thirst, he turned to the door. And that was when I decided to intervene. I picked up my phone and dialed the house landline. It was the only phone that still worked, powered by the old copper wires. The ringing sound was jarring in the tense room. They all froze. They looked at the phone on the wall. Answer it, I whispered to the screen. Brandon walked over. He picked up the receiver. His hand was shaking. Hello, I spoke clearly. My voice was calm. Put it on speaker, Brandon. He pressed the button. My voice filled the kitchen. Gavin Miller, I said. Gavin looked at the ceiling, terrified. Clint, I have you on video, Gavin, I said. Breaking and entering. Grand larceny. That watch is valued at over $200,000. That is a Class 1 felony. Mandatory prison time. Gavin went pale. Clint, wait. I was just securing it, for safekeeping. You have 5 minutes, I said. Put the watch on the kitchen counter. Then get out of my house. All of you. Or what? Gavin tried to bluster. You are not even here. Or I send the video to the police department, I said. And the sheriff is a personal friend of mine. He is already on his way for a wellness check. If that watch isn't on the counter when he walks in, you are leaving in handcuffs. Gavin looked at the watch. He looked at the door. He looked at his wife and daughter, who were looking at him like he was a monster. He slammed the watch down on the counter. It made a heavy thud. There he screamed at the ceiling. Take your damn watch, I hope you choke on it. He ran. He didn't wait for his wife. He didn't wait for his daughter. He ran out the front door and down the driveway, disappearing into the heat of the afternoon. Patricia collapsed onto a chair, sobbing. Brittany slid to the floor. Brandon stood by the counter. He picked up the watch. He held it gently. Dad, he said to the phone. Are you there? I didn't answer. I hung up. The family was shattered. The thief had fled. But the lesson wasn't over. Because now they were alone in the heat, without water, without money, and without the lie that had held them together. I looked at the time. The sheriff would be there in 10 minutes. And he wasn't coming for a wellness check. He was coming with the eviction notice I had filed that morning. It was time to flush the rest of the waste. 10 minutes. That was exactly how long it took for the flashing blue lights to cut through the heat haze of the afternoon. I watched from my laptop screen as the sheriff's cruiser rolled silently up the driveway, followed by 2 deputies in a separate SUV. They didn't use the siren. They didn't need to. The silence of the house was loud enough. Inside the kitchen, the mood was catatonic. Brandon was still holding the phone, staring at the empty space where Gavin had been. Patricia was weeping into a dish towel, her makeup running in dark streaks down her face. Brittany was sitting on the floor, hugging her knees, rocking back and forth. They looked like the survivors of a natural disaster, stripped of their dignity by the relentless heat and the weight of their own choices. When the heavy knock came at the door, they all flinched. Brandon stood up. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. He looked at the door, then at the lease agreement lying on the counter, the document that had started this entire nightmare. He grabbed it. It was his only weapon left. He truly believed it was his shield. I am handling this. Brandon croaked, his throat dry. I have rights. We are tenants. They can't just kick us out. He walked to the door. He opened it. Sheriff Jim Miller stood on the porch. He was a large man wearing a tan uniform that was perfectly pressed despite the humidity. He wore mirrored sunglasses that reflected Brandon's disheveled, desperate face back at him. Behind him, the 2 deputies stood with their hands resting on their belts. Brandon Harper Jim asked, his voice a deep rumble. Yes, Brandon said, trying to straighten his spine. Officer, thank God you are here. My father-in-law, He had a mental break. He stole something and ran. "We need to file a report." "We already picked him up," Jim said impassively. "A patrol unit found him walking down Highway 98, trying to flag down a pawnshop owner. He is in custody for grand larceny. We recovered the watch." Patricia let out a wail from the kitchen. "My husband." In jail, Jim ignored the noise. He looked at Brandon. "I am not here for the report, son. I am here to execute an emergency eviction order based on contract default and criminal activity on the premises." Brandon held up the papers in his shaking hand. "You can't do that. We have a lease. Look, it is right here. It is a 30-day commercial lease. We have tenant rights. You have to give us 30 days' notice. You have to go through the courts." I leaned in closer to my screen. This was the moment. The moment Brandon realized that the devil is in the details. Jim took the papers from Brandon. He didn't read them. He didn't need to. I had emailed him the specific clause highlighted in red an hour ago. "Turn to page 14, Jim said. Clause 9, Section B. Brandon fumbled with the pages. His sweat dripped onto the paper. He found the page. "Read it out loud," Jim ordered. Brandon squinted. In the event that the tenant's liability balance exceeds $50,000. "Keep reading," Jim said. "The property owner reserves the right to immediate repossession without court order." Brandon's voice trailed off. He looked up, his eyes wide, and the next sentence Jim prompted. "Tenant agrees that exceeding the liability threshold constitutes a voluntary surrender of the property and waives all rights to standard eviction proceedings." Brandon lowered the paper. 50,000. According to the report filed by the owner, Jim said, consulting his own clipboard, "Your current liability for damages, unpaid rent, and theft stands at over $105,000. You triggered the immediate ejection clause 3 days ago. You are trespassing." But we didn't know," Brandon stammered. "We didn't know." "The total ignorance of the debt is not an exemption from the contract," Jim said. He stepped forward, crossing the threshold. "You have 10 minutes to gather your personal effects and vacate the premises. Anything left after 10 minutes will be impounded." 10 minutes! Patricia screamed, running into the hallway. "I have suitcases to pack. I have toiletries. I can't pack in 10 minutes. "Then you better start moving, ma'am," Jim said. He checked his watch. 9 minutes, 50 seconds. The scene that followed was pure, unadulterated chaos. It was the frantic scramble of rats on a sinking ship. Brandon ran to the bedroom. He grabbed armfuls of clothes from the closet, not bothering to fold them. He shoved shirts and shorts into garbage bags. Brittany was in the bathroom sweeping expensive creams and makeup into her purse with her forearm. Bottles crashed to the floor and shattered. She didn't stop. She was crying hysterically, muttering about how unfair it was, how she was going to sue everyone. Patricia was the worst. She was trying to pack her oversized luggage in the living room. She was trying to fold things. She was wasting time. 5 minutes, a deputy shouted from the doorway. "I can't close the suitcase," Patricia shrieked. "It is too full." "Leave it!" Brandon yelled, running past her with a trash bag slung over his shoulder. "Just leave it, Mom! I am not leaving my vintage caftans!" she yelled back. 2 minutes. The deputies entered the house. They weren't aggressive, but they were firm. They started guiding them toward the door. "Okay, that is time," Jim announced. "Everyone out, now." "But I am barefoot," Brittany cried. "I can't find my sandals." "Out," Jim repeated. They were herded out the front door like cattle, Brandon clutching his garbage bag of clothes, Brittany barefoot and holding a bag of cosmetics, Patricia dragging one open suitcase while leaving 2 others behind. They stumbled out into the blinding afternoon sun. The heat hit them instantly. They stood on the driveway, blinking, disoriented. The deputies closed the front door. I heard the lock click. Jim walked past them to his cruiser. He pulled a yellow roll of tape from the trunk. Police line, do not cross. He taped across the front door. You can't leave us here, Brandon pleaded, walking toward the sheriff. We have nowhere to go. My car. The movers took the keys. We don't have money for a cab. Jim turned around. He lowered his sunglasses and looked at Brandon. There is a bus stop 2 miles down the road, Jim said. It goes to the city center. There is a shelter there. Or you can call a friend. But you can't stay here. He got into his car. The deputies got into theirs. Wait! Patricia screamed, banging on the window of the cruiser. My husband! What about my husband? Ask the public defender, Jim said through the glass. They drove away. The silence returned to the neighborhood, heavy and suffocating. I switched to the external security cameras. The image was pathetic. My son, the man who thought he was a tycoon, was standing on the hot asphalt in dirty shorts and a stained t-shirt holding a black plastic bag. His wife was sitting on the curb, weeping into her hands, her bare feet resting on the burning pavement. His mother-in-law was standing over her open suitcase, trying to shield her face from the sun with a magazine. They looked like refugees from a lifestyle they could never afford. A neighbor across the street, Mrs. Higgins, came out to check her mail. She stopped. She looked at the trio on the curb. She looked at the police tape on the door. She shook her head, adjusted her sun hat, and walked back inside. She didn't offer help. She knew trash when she saw it. Brandon looked up at the camera. He knew I was watching. He knew the lens above the garage door was my eye. Dad, he whispered. I know you can see me. Please. I took a sip of water in my hotel room. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt a cold, hard resolution. He had signed the paper. He had brought the wolves into the den, and now he was outside with them. I typed a final text message to Brandon. Lease terminated. Security deposit forfeited. Outstanding balance of $105,000 has been sent to collections. Good luck. I watched him read it. I watched him drop the phone onto the pavement. He didn't pick it up. He just turned and started walking down the road, away from the beach, away from the luxury, toward the long, hot walk to nowhere. Brittany and Patricia scrambled to follow him, dragging the heavy suitcase, their heels clicking on the asphalt, their voices rising in a chorus of blame and misery. They were gone. My house was empty. It was broken, dirty, and violated, but it was mine again. I closed the laptop. It was done. It had been 48 hours since the sheriff escorted them off my property. I knew they were still in town. They had no money for plane tickets, no car to drive north, and too much pride to hitchhike. They were holed up in the Starlight Motel on the outskirts of Destin, a place where the sheets are thin and the sirens are loud. I knew this because I was paying for the room. Anonymously, of course. It was the last charity they would ever receive from me, a final act of mercy before the guillotine dropped. I was sitting in the executive boardroom on the 45th floor of the Harper Holdings Tower in downtown Chicago. I had flown back on my private jet the night before, leaving the ruins of the beach house behind. The air here was different. It was crisp filtered and smelled of polished mahogany and serious money. I wore a tailored Italian suit, a stark contrast to the fishing shirts they were used to seeing me in. Beside me sat O'Malley, looking like a shark in a pinstripe vest, tapping away on his tablet. They are in the lobby, O'Malley said without looking up. Security says they are causing a scene. Gavin is threatening to sue the receptionist. Let them up, I said. I want them to see the view. I swiveled my chair around to face the floor-to-ceiling windows. The entire city was spread out below me. I had built a third of it. My name was on half the cranes dotting the skyline. But to my son, I was just a retired contractor with a lucky savings account. He was about to learn the difference between having money and being power. The elevator doors down the hall chimed. I heard the heavy footsteps of security guards escorting them. Then the shouting started. "This is illegal," Gavin's voice boomed, muffled by the heavy oak doors. "I demand to see the manager. We are here to see Clint Harper. He is probably the janitor." The double doors to the boardroom swung open. They spilled into this room like trash dumped from a bin. They looked terrible. Gavin was wearing the same wrinkled linen clothes from the eviction, now stained with sweat and cheap motel coffee. Patricia's hair was a frizzy disaster, her makeup caked and cracking. Brittany was barefoot, holding a pair of broken sandals. And Brandon. Brandon looked like a man who had seen a ghost. They stopped dead. They looked at the massive conference table long enough to seat 20 people. They looked at the view of the skyline. They looked at the oil paintings on the walls. And then they looked at me. I slowly turned my chair. I rested my elbows on the table and steepled my fingers. "Hello, family," I said. My voice was calm, amplified slightly by the room's acoustics. Gavin blinked. He looked at me, then at the room, then back at me. His brain couldn't process the image. He was trying to reconcile the image of the beach bum Clint with the man sitting at the head of a multi-billion-dollar table. "Clint," he croaked. "What? What are you doing here? Did you break in?" "I am the chairman of the board, Gavin," I said coldly. "This is my building. This is my company. You are standing on my carpet." "No." Gavin laughed, a nervous, jagged sound. "You are a contractor. You fix toilets. You don't own skyscrapers." "Read the wall behind you," O'Malley said, pointing with his pen. They turned. On the mahogany paneling in brushed steel letters it read, "Harper Holdings. Established 1980. Clint Harper, founder and chairman." Brandon let out a small, strangled whimper. He walked forward, his hands trembling. He touched the back of a leather chair. "Dad," he whispered. Is this real?" "It has always been real, Brandon," I said. "I just never felt the need to wave it in your face. I thought raising you with values was more important than raising you with a silver spoon. Clearly I failed." The shock on Gavin's face morphed instantly into rage. The greed took over. He saw the office, the suit, the building, and he didn't see power. He saw a payday. He saw a target. "You lied to us," Gavin roared, slamming his fist onto my table. "You sat there in that beach house pretending to be a nobody while you were sitting on billions. You tricked us into signing that lease. This is entrapment." "It is not entrapment," O'Malley said smoothly. "It is a contract, and you defaulted." "I don't care about your contract," Gavin screamed, his face turning purple. He lunged toward the table, trying to look menacing. He looked like a rabid chihuahua barking at a wolf. "You humiliated me. You had me arrested. I spent 12 hours in a holding cell with drug dealers." "You owe me, Clint. I owe you nothing," I replied, not moving an inch. "You owe me for pain and suffering," Gavin yelled, spit flying from his mouth. "I am going to sue you for everything you have. I will take this building. I will take your company. I will tell the press you are a con artist who abuses his family." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, the invoice from the beach house. "You think I am going to pay this?" he shouted, tearing the paper in half and throwing the pieces at me. "I am not paying a dime. You are going to write me a check for $5 million for emotional distress, or I am going to tear this office apart." He grabbed a crystal pitcher of water from the center of the table and raised it over his head, threatening to smash it against the polished wood. "Do it," I said softly. Gavin froze. "That pitcher is Waterford crystal," I continued. "It cost $600. The table you are leaning on is custom rosewood, valued at $40,000. Go ahead, Gavin. Smash it. Add it to the tab. You are already in the hole for $100,000. What is another 40? Gavin's hand shook. He looked at the pitcher. He looked at me. He saw the cold, dead certainty in my eyes. I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't intimidated. I was waiting for him to make a mistake so I could bury him. He slowly lowered the pitcher. He set it down with a clatter. "You are a monster," Patricia hissed from the doorway. "You have all this money and you let us sleep in a motel. You let your son starve." "I didn't let him starve," I said, looking at Brandon. "I gave him an education. I gave him a debt-free start in life. I gave him a job opportunity he turned down because he wanted to be an entrepreneur. And for the last 5 years, I have been secretly paying his rent because he was too proud to ask for help and too lazy to work for it." Brandon looked up, his eyes wide and wet. You paid my rent." "Who do you think paid it?" I asked. "Your drop-shipping business, your crypto wallet." "You haven't made a profit since 2018, Brandon. I have been subsidizing your ego." Brittany gasped. She looked at Brandon with horror. "You told me you were making 6 figures. I thought I was." Brandon stammered. "The money just appeared in the account." "Because I put it there." I slammed my hand on the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "I stopped the transfers the day you kicked me out of my own house. That is why your cards declined. That is why your life fell apart. Because without me carrying you, you can't even stand up." Gavin wasn't listening. He was pacing, looking for an angle. "We are family, Clint," he yelled. "You can't treat us like this. We have rights, squatters' rights, something you were evicted for criminal activity," O'Malley interjected. "You lost your rights when you stole the watch." "That was a misunderstanding," Gavin shouted. "And anyway, I am the grandfather of your future grandchildren. You have to take care of us." I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I walked around the table until I was standing right in front of Gavin. He shrank back. He smelled of fear and old sweat. "I don't have to do anything," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than his screaming. "I am the chairman. I built this city. I deal with union bosses and corrupt politicians for breakfast. You think a bankrupt strip mall fraudster scares me?" Gavin opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "Sit down," I ordered. He sat. He collapsed into the leather chair as if his strings had been cut. Patricia sat. Brittany sat. Brandon remained standing, looking at me like I was a stranger he had just met. Now I said, walking back to the head of the table, "Let's look at the reality of your situation. Because you didn't just break a lease, you committed federal crimes." I nodded to O'Malley. "Show them." O'Malley tapped his tablet. The giant screen on the wall behind me flickered to life. It wasn't a PowerPoint presentation. It was a surveillance video, and it was going to destroy what little dignity they had left. The screen behind me flickered, dissolving the Harper Holdings logo into a high-definition video feed. It wasn't a live feed this time. It was a recording time-stamped 4 days ago. The image was crisp, showing the interior of my private study back at the beach house. The silence in the boardroom was absolute, save for the hum of the projector and the shallow, terrified breathing of my son. O'Malley stood up, smoothing his vest. He didn't look at the screen. He looked directly at Brandon. "Mr. Harper." He began, his voice dry as dust. "You seem to be under the impression that you vandalized your father's vacation home. A personal dispute. A civil matter." Brandon wiped his nose with his sleeve. "It is his house," he mumbled. "He can't sue me for spilling wine in his own house." "That is where you are wrong," O'Malley said. He tapped a key on his tablet. A document appeared on the screen next to the video. It was a deed of trust. "The property located at 442 Ocean Drive is not owned by Clint Harper," O'Malley explained. 6 years ago, upon the passing of Catherine Harper, the property was transferred into the Catherine Harper Charitable Trust. It is a registered 501c3 nonprofit entity. Its primary purpose is to provide cost-free convalescence vacations for families of injured construction workers. I saw Brandon's jaw drop. He knew about the charity. He knew his mother had set it up. But he never cared enough to ask where the assets were located. "You signed a commercial lease with a federal charity, Brandon," I said, my voice cutting through the air. "And you didn't just damage a house. You destroyed assets designated for families who have lost everything. That isn't just a lease violation. That is destruction of charitable property. It brings federal scrutiny. And the IRS doesn't have a sense of humor." Gavin scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "Oh, please. It is a tax dodge. Everyone does it. You can't scare me with paperwork." O'Malley ignored him. He pressed another key. The video on the screen started to play. It was the footage from the study. We watched in silence as Gavin entered the frame, sweating, looking over his shoulder. We watched him wedge the crowbar into the cabinet. We heard the glass shatter, amplified by the boardroom speakers. It sounded like a gunshot. We watched him shove the Rolex Daytona into his linen shorts. Gavin went pale. He stood up, knocking his chair back. That is doctored," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. "That is a deepfake. I never did that. We recovered the watch from your shaving kit, Gavin," I said calmly. "The sheriff found it. But that is not the problem. The problem is what that watch represents." O'Malley stepped forward. That watch was not just a timepiece. It was listed as item 44B in the trust's inventory of assets. It was scheduled for auction next month to fund a scholarship program. By stealing it, you didn't just steal from Clint. You stole from a federally regulated inventory. That is grand larceny of charitable assets. The sentencing guidelines are severe. Gavin looked at the door. He looked at the window. He looked like a rat realizing the trap had no exit. I was protecting it," he stammered. "I saw the house was unsecured. I took it for safekeeping." "Is that why you were walking toward a pawn shop on Highway 98? I asked. But I wasn't done. The theft was the nail in the coffin, but I wanted to burn the wood first. I wanted Brandon to see exactly what he had married into. I wanted him to taste the ash of his own stupidity. I nodded to O'Malley. The final slide. The screen changed again. This time it wasn't a video. It was a dossier. Bank statements, credit reports, court filings, all featuring the names Gavin and Patricia Miller. "Brandon, look at the screen," I ordered. Brandon looked up. He squinted at the numbers. "What is this?" he asked. "This is the Miller family fortune," I said. The documents were a roadmap of financial ruin, a Chapter 7 bankruptcy filing from 5 years ago, a foreclosure notice on their old house in Connecticut, 7 maxed-out credit cards with a combined debt of $200,000, and a credit score for Gavin that was in the low 400s. Gavin screamed, "You have no right. That is private financial data. This is illegal. It is public record," Gavin O'Malley said legally. "Bankruptcy filings are public. Lien judgments are public. And when you tried to use Clint's identity to open a line of credit last week, which we blocked by the way you waived your right to privacy." I watched Brandon. He was reading the screen. His eyes were darting back and forth, trying to make sense of the zeros. Bankrupt, Brandon whispered. He turned to Brittany. He turned to Gavin. "You told me you had a liquidity issue. You told me your capital was tied up in offshore bonds." "I don't have bonds, Brandon," Gavin yelled, his facade finally shattering under the weight of the truth. "I don't have anything. I haven't had anything since 2019, Brandon stood up. He looked at Patricia. "And the yacht club, the summer home in the Hamptons." "We rented it," Patricia wailed, burying her face in her hands. "We rented it for the weekend to impress you. We thought you were the one with the money." "You thought I was the one," Brandon choked out a laugh. A horrible, broken sound. "You made me pay for dinner every night for 3 years. You made me buy the cars. You made me pay for the wedding. You said you were teaching me how to handle wealth. We were teaching you how to spend it, Gavin snapped. And you were happy to play along, big shot. You loved playing the tycoon. Because I thought we were partners, Brandon screamed. I thought we were building something. I spent every dime I had on you people. I maxed out my cards. I borrowed from my dad. I have nothing left, Brittany stood up. She looked at her parents with disgust. But it was the disgust of a co-conspirator who got caught, not a victim. You said he had a trust fund, Dad. Brittany yelled at Gavin. You said he was the heir to Harper Holdings. He is, Gavin shouted back. Look at this office. Look at his father. The money is right there. We just have to get it, he pointed at me. He owes us, Gavin roared. He owes us for taking care of his loser son. The silence that followed was heavy. Brandon looked at me. He looked at the father he had ignored, the father he had evicted, the father he had lied to, and then he looked at the parasites he had fed with my money. You knew, Brandon whispered to Brittany. You knew they were broke. Brittany crossed her arms. She didn't deny it. Everyone pads their resume, Brandon. You lied too. You acted like you ran this company. Turns out you are just a charity case. The doors to the boardroom opened. I hadn't called security. I had called the Chicago Police Department. 2 officers walked in, followed by a detective in a cheap suit who looked like he had seen everything and was impressed by nothing. Gavin Miller, the detective asked. Gavin froze. He looked at the window again, calculating the drop. It was 45 stories. He looked at the police. I didn't do anything, Gavin squeaked. We have a warrant from the state of Florida, the detective said, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. Grand larceny, flight to avoid prosecution, and we have a few questions about some wire fraud allegations regarding a fake investment fund you have been peddling. They walked around the table. Gavin tried to hide behind Patricia. She pushed him away. Get off me, she shrieked. I didn't steal the watch. It was him, the officer grabbed Gavin's arm. He twisted it behind his back. The click of the handcuffs was loud in the room. You can't do this, Gavin yelled as they hauled him toward the door. I am a sick man. I have a heart condition, Clint. Clint, tell them it was a misunderstanding. We are family. I picked up my glass of water. I took a slow sip. I looked Gavin in the eye. My family is on the wall, I said, pointing to the portrait of my late wife behind me. You are just a trespasser. They dragged him out. His screams echoed down the hallway until the elevator doors closed. Patricia collapsed into the chair, sobbing about her reputation. Brittany was texting, probably trying to delete her social media posts. And Brandon stood alone at the end of the table. He looked at his wife. He looked at his mother-in-law. He looked at the empty chair where his father-in-law had been. He looked at me. I am sorry, he whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't smile. I just looked at him. The apology was too late. It was too cheap. And it was only happening because the check had bounced. I turned to O'Malley. Clear the room, I said. I have work to do. But the final blow was yet to come, because Brandon still thought he had a home to go back to. He didn't know that the apartment he shared with Brittany, the one I had been paying for, had a lease that expired. Yesterday. The silence in the boardroom was heavier than the humidity in Florida had ever been. The police were gone. The shouting was over. O'Malley sat quietly at the end of the table, organizing his files, the only sound in the room, the soft rustle of paper. I stood by the window looking out at the city I had helped build, waiting. I knew what was coming next. It was the final act of the tragedy, the moment the hero realizes there is no deus ex machina coming to save him. Brandon was standing near the door, trembling. He looked at the empty chairs where his wife and in-laws had sat. He looked at the floor. Finally, he looked at me. He took a step forward, then another, his legs unsteady. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Dad, he whispered. I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes on the horizon. Dad, please, he said, his voice cracking. You have to help me. I am drowning. I turned then. I looked at him. He was crying freely now, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. He walked to the edge of the massive table and gripped it with white knuckles. I owe $100,000, Dad, he sobbed. The credit cards, the damage to the house, the lease plus the interest. They are going to bankrupt me. They are going to garnish my wages. I will lose everything. You have nothing to lose, Brandon, I said calmly. You don't have a house, you don't have a car, you don't have savings. You are already at zero. The only place to go is up. No, he cried, dropping to his knees. He actually knelt on the carpet. It was a pathetic sight, my son, a grown man of 32, begging like a child who had broken a vase. I can't go to jail, Dad. Please. You have millions. You just said it. You built this city. One check. Just one check, and this all goes away. I will pay you back. I swear. I will work for you. I will sweep floors. Just please don't let them ruin me. I looked down at him. I remembered teaching him to ride a bike. I remembered paying for his first car. I remembered the pride I felt when he graduated. And I remembered the phone call 2 weeks ago when he kicked me out of my own home to impress a woman who despised him. I walked over to the chair where I had left my jacket. I reached into the inside pocket and pulled out my checkbook. It was a long, leather-bound book. Brandon's eyes lit up hope. It is a dangerous thing. He scrambled up to his feet, wiping his eyes. Thank you, he gasped. Thank you, Dad. I promise I will never ask for anything again. I will be better. I uncapped my fountain pen. I opened the book. I smoothed the paper. I wrote the date. I wrote the payee. Catherine Harper Charitable Trust. I wrote the amount. $56,500. I signed my name with a flourish. I tore the check out. The ripping sound was loud in the quiet room. Brandon reached for it, his hand trembling. I pulled it back. I handed the check to O'Malley. Deposit this immediately, I said to the lawyer. This covers the structural damage to the beach house and the missing inventory. The trust is made whole. There will be no federal charges filed against Brandon for destruction of charitable property. Brandon froze. His hand was still outstretched. What he whispered. What about the rest, the rent, the credit cards? The debt to Gavin, I put the pen away. I closed the checkbook. The trust is satisfied, I said. The criminal liability is gone. You won't go to federal prison for destroying a non-profit asset. But the money, Brandon pleaded. The $100,000 I owe on the cards. The money I owe the bank, that is your debt, Brandon, I said. Not mine. But I can't pay it, he screamed. I don't have a job. Then get one, I said. I walked closer to him. I looked him dead in the eye. You wanted to be a big shot, Brandon. You wanted to play house. You wanted to be the provider. You wanted to be the man who commands respect. Well, this is how you get it. You earn it. I don't understand, he stammered. Why are you doing this? You have the money. It is nothing to you, it is everything to me, I replied, my voice hard as steel. Because for 32 years I have been your safety net. I paid your way. I fixed your mistakes. I smoothed the road so you wouldn't trip. And do you know what that created? It created a weak, ungrateful man who lets his father-in-law slap him in the face and his wife treat him like a servant. I pointed to the door. I am not giving you money, Brandon. I am giving you something much more valuable. I am giving you the consequences of your own actions. I am giving you the gift of desperation. Because desperation is the only thing that will make a man out of you. He stared at me, his mouth open, the tears drying on his face. "You are leaving me with nothing. I am leaving you with your life," I said, "and your health, and a negative net worth. Most men start with less. Figure it out." I turned my back on him. I walked to the window. O'Malley stood up. "Mr. Harper," he said to Brandon, "security is waiting in the hall. They will escort you out of the building. Your access pass has been deactivated." "Dad," Brandon yelled one last time, "don't do this." I didn't turn around. I didn't speak. I just watched the traffic moving far below, thousands of people going to work, fighting their own battles, paying their own debts. I heard the heavy door open. I heard O'Malley murmur something. I heard Brandon's footsteps, heavy and slow, walking out of the room. The door clicked shut. I was alone. I took a deep breath. It hurt. It hurt more than the eviction. It hurt more than the insults. But it was a clean pain, the pain of setting a broken bone so it can heal straight. I looked at the checkbook on the table. I had saved his freedom. I had kept him out of prison. But I had sentenced him to the real world. And honestly, it was the most loving thing I had ever done. The Aegean Sea is a different color than the Gulf of Mexico. It is a deep royal blue that looks like ink. I sat on the aft deck of a 60-foot catamaran anchored just off the coast of Santorini. The sun was setting, turning the white buildings on the cliffs into cubes of gold. It was quiet. No shouting, no breaking glass, no demands for money, just the wind and the water. My tablet vibrated on the table next to my wine. It was the monthly update from O'Malley. He is thorough. He knows I like closure. I opened the email. It was short. Gavin Miller pleaded guilty. 2 years in state prison. His heart condition miraculously cleared up when the judge mentioned a longer sentence if he went to trial. Patricia is working housekeeping at a Motel 6 in Alabama. O'Malley noted that she has been fired twice for complaining about the guests. Brittany filed for divorce 3 days after the eviction. She is currently dating a jet ski rental operator in Miami. And Brandon, my son. He is working for Anderson Concrete in Chicago, my biggest competitor. He is not in the office. He is on the pour crew. Waking up at 4 in the morning, carrying rebar, hauling bags, paying off his debts 1 hour of minimum wage at a time. O'Malley included a photo taken from a distance. Brandon looked tired. He looked dirty. But he looked real. He was standing on his own 2 feet for the first time in his life. I turned off the tablet. I picked up my glass. The wine was cool and crisp. I didn't miss them. I didn't miss the drama. I didn't miss the feeling of being used. I realized then that I hadn't lost a family. I had removed a tumor. People say you should never give up on family. They say blood is thicker than water. But sometimes to save the patient, you have to cut off the limb. I took a sip of wine and looked at the horizon. I was alone, and it was the best company I had ever had. We are often taught that family is sacred, that love means being a perpetual safety net. But I learned the hard way that there is a fine line between supporting someone and disabling them. By constantly shielding my son from the consequences of his choices, I didn't help him grow. I stunted him. I realized that true love sometimes requires the calculated cruelty of consequences. It requires standing back and letting them fall so they can finally learn the strength required to stand back up. Dignity is not negotiable, and peace is not found by giving pieces of yourself away until you are hollow. Sometimes the only way to save your life is to prune the dead branches, even if they share your blood. If you enjoyed this story of justice and boundaries, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more. Have you ever had to make the difficult decision to cut off a toxic family member? Tell me your story in the comments below.